What's going on, everybody? Welcome to The Shift on YouTube. This is Francisco Rojas. It's been way too long since I've done a short video. Been very busy. Me and Nick have been doing the podcast, which of course, make sure you're checking out every single episode. If you haven't checked out the podcast, make sure that watch us on YouTube. You can either listen to us on Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts. Link to listen to the podcast will be in the description box, of course. So make sure that you are locked in to The Shift. Make sure you're locked in. So, but just been busy with The Shift, the podcast, with work, with holidays too, with just a lot of other things as well. So feels good that I get an opportunity to give you guys a short video. So with that being said, it is Hall of Fame season. It's the beginning of January. We're right in the midst of it. So, of course, I had to bring you guys a Cooperstown case. Let's investigate. I don't even remember the last time I did one of these. I think it was this time last year when I've done Carlos Beltran. Joe Mauer. Joe Mauer is an interesting one for me because initially, I didn't think he was a Hall of Famer off the bat. And look, he had a great career and whatnot. His peak was like unbelievable as a catcher at the time. But I went on Ryan Thibodeau's ballot tracker. If you don't know who Ryan Thibodeau is, he's somebody that's like the official ballot tracker of everybody that makes their ballots public. The Baseball Writers Association of America, the Hall of Fame voters. And I think last time I checked, Mauer was at 80+%. 80+%. That's breaking the threshold to get into the Hall of Fame. And this is his first try. So it seems like even Mauer doesn't get in this year. He's going to get in at some point. From that, right? From that at least. Not the end all be all, but from that. And I said, no way is he getting into the Hall of Fame. And I look back at his numbers, and you look at a lot of his numbers, and they're great. They're great for his career, but when you look at the JAWS metric, which is Jay Jaffe's metric where it compiles, I believe it compiles the wins above replacement stat from Baseball Reference and the 7-year peak WAR from Baseball Reference as well, and it combines it into one stat, for, specifically for the Hall of Fame. And if you look at Mauer's numbers compared to, I guess, other catchers, he's a Hall of Famer. Like, he's a Hall of Famer from that perspective. But Mauer isn't a Hall of Famer for me. Mauer isn't because he doesn't have the one thing you look at with these other catchers that are in the Hall of Fame, and you compare Mauer to these other catchers, they at least played at the catcher position for at least 80% of their career. So 80% of their positions played were at catcher. I think that's important because the catcher position specifically is a tough position, especially on the body and whatnot. Joe Mauer has 60% of his games played at the catcher position. 60%. It's not like he has 80 to 90% like a Pudge, Ivan Rodriguez, or the other Pudge, Carlton Fisk, or Gary Carter, or Johnny Bench. Like, all these guys at least have, at least 80%. I think Gary Carter's at 79, whatever, you round up. So, it's important. It's important to, when you look at catchers, that they played most of their games at that position because of how taxing that position is. And it makes those numbers that you look at for catchers differently, right? Like, 15 home runs in a season for a catcher maybe back in the day was good. Or you get to 2025, it's like, oh, that catcher has power. Or it's like a power hitting catcher. So when you look at Mauer's numbers from that perspective, if he had played all of his games at the catching position, you would say, oh yeah, he's a lock for a Hall of Fame. But no, he played 60% of his games at the catcher, being a catcher. Other positions were DH and first base. And that was mixed in even like with his, towards the end of his prime, 2010, 2011, 2012. And then he started getting hurt and he officially moved away from being a catcher. He was, specifically a first baseman, and a DH. So I'm not saying he played those positions bad, but when we're looking at the Hall of Fame case for Joe Mauer, you can't, I'm sorry, you can't play, only a little more than half of your games at catcher and be like, oh, well, best catcher of his generation. Like, yeah, maybe for his peak, he was great. And yeah, he was, from 2006 to 2009, somewhere, maybe 2010, somewhere around there. It was like, yeah, he was an unbelievable, all around, great baseball player, but he played catcher. Now, Mauer, he didn't play the position like other Hall of Famers that are already in who have, the at least 80% or at least somewhere around that. So, with that being said, going forward, if you're judging somebody like a Joe Mauer or a case like this, or maybe Mauer's numbers overall, as a catcher getting into the Hall of Fame, it should be about 75%. I think that is the minimum amount of games that you're playing, to say, oh, he's getting in as a catcher. He's getting in because of those numbers mixed into him being a catcher. Pudge, the numbers that he put up, he played not literally 99%. Pudge Rodriguez, 99% at being a catcher. 99% of his games. That was a factor. If Pudge only played 60 to 70% of his games at catcher, not only, but you get what I mean, and played other positions, might be different. So I think that's important when you're judging the case of Joe Mauer. I disagree with a lot of people that they think he's a Hall of Famer. It's like, oh, he's one of the best, catchers of his, and yeah, for 4 or 5 years when he was playing catcher for those 5 years, his career wasn't enough. Had a great career though. I want to end with saying this: had a really great career. But I don't think he's a Hall of Famer. He's not. But I want to know from you. Twitter, @Rojas_media_. Let me know what you think. Is Joe Mauer a Hall of Famer? Yes, no. Obviously, some of you can just disagree with me. If there's 80% of writers out there that think he's a Hall of Famer, I'm interested to see. Let me know what you think. @Rojas_media_ on Twitter. Make sure that you subscribe to the podcast. You're subscribing to the YouTube channel. All that good stuff. Let me know in the comments. Want to know from you. And also, who else do you want to see me do an investigation on? Who do you want me to investigate as far as Cooperstown goes? Let me know your thoughts. It's going to do it for me, Francisco Rojas. Stay tuned. New podcast episode of The Shift coming your way. See you guys.